Hey everyone, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we are unpacking one of the most fascinating and frankly just mind-boggling financial stories of our entire generation. We're talking about the absolute largest corporate fraud in modern German history. A company that somehow managed to fool top regulators, major auditors, and savvy investors for over a decade, building a massive global empire entirely out of thin air. We've got some incredible ground to cover, so let's start with the one number that makes this whole story so staggering. $2 billion. I mean, just imagine that for a second. You have this incredibly powerful company, literally worth more than Germany's oldest, most established banks, waking up one day and realizing that exactly $2 billion of its own cash simply didn't exist. And we're not talking about money that was, tied up in bad investments or temporarily misplaced. It just wasn't there at all. This wasn't some minor accounting glitch. It was a total black hole in their balance sheet. $2 billion of pure illusion. So how on earth does a modern publicly traded company lose track of that kind of money without anyone noticing? Well, to figure that out, we have to look at where they started.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the golden child of Fintech. So, tracking back to the 2000s, right in the middle of the massive European fintech boom, Wirecard wasn't just seen as another payment processor. They were hailed as the next big thing. I mean, they were the absolute golden child of European financial technology. Investors were completely obsessed with them because they were promising this explosive growth in markets where the traditional older banks were really struggling. And this hype train just kept rolling until 2018 when they hit the absolute pinnacle of corporate prestige. They actually replaced Commerzbank in the DAX 30 index. But, as we're about to see, the entire foundation of this massive success was completely hollow.
Because what's really interesting here is the sheer contrast between what they were saying and what was actually happening behind closed doors. On the surface, Wirecard claimed they were handling billions in transactions for thousands of merchants across Asia. That was the story. That was the shiny narrative driving their stock price to the moon. But the reality? Far more sinister. Those merchants, the billions in transactions, they were basically digital ghosts. Wirecard was playing a brilliant, sophisticated game of smoke and mirrors, using third-party acquiring partners to just artificially inflate their revenue. They made it look like all this money was flowing through their systems, but the cash never actually landed in their own accounts. It was a complete facade. Which brings us to Section 2, cracks in the armor. It all eventually boiled down to one very simple question. Where is the money? For years, a few skeptics out there, especially Financial Times journalist McCrum, looked at Wirecard's numbers and just knew things didn't add up. But taking on the darling of the stock market, that is incredibly dangerous. For simply doing his job, for literally just demanding proof that this wealth existed, McCrum faced aggressive lawsuits. He got personal threats. They even put him under surveillance. It was this intense, terrifying campaign of intimidation designed to silence absolutely anyone who dared to question the golden child. But get this, here's where the story shifts from just a bad corporate fraud into a total systemic nightmare. When journalists and whistleblowers started sounding the alarm, regulators actually chose to investigate the whistleblowers, not the company, the whistleblowers. It's a chilling reality, right? The sheer absurdity of it. Professional institutions, the exact people whose sole job is to protect investors, were so utterly blinded by Wirecard's hype that they went after the critics. The fake numbers looked so good on paper that the watchdogs decided, hey, it must be the critics manipulating the market. And the regulators definitely weren't the only ones dropping the ball here. For years, the prestigious auditing firm EY just kept signing off on these fake accounts year after year, giving them the green light. It actually wasn't until a final forced audit finally scrutinized the Philippine trustee accounts that the jig was up. That was the moment the devastating truth was confirmed. The $2 billion simply did not exist. The paper trail just ended in a void. And when that undeniable proof finally hit the surface, it triggered pure, unadulterated panic across the entire financial sector. Moving right along to Section 3, the fall and the fugitive. Zero. When the truth broke, Wirecard stock didn't just take a little hit. It wasn't a standard market correction. It plummeted to absolute zero. Almost overnight, this giant company that had replaced a cornerstone bank was rendered entirely worthless. And the human cost of that? Thousands upon thousands of investors. We're talking pension funds, huge institutional investors, and just everyday retail traders lost absolutely everything they had put into it. The wealth that was supposed to be there just evaporated. And the fallout for the guys running the show?
It was swift, but honestly, pretty bizarre. CEO Marcus Brahm was arrested right away, as authorities finally closed in. But the chief operating officer, Jan Marsalek, he completely vanished. Poof, gone. Today, he's actually one of the world's most wanted fugitives. Intelligence reports suggest he's potentially hiding out somewhere in Russia or Belarus. He somehow managed to just slip right through the fingers of European authorities while his entire company burned to the ground. It just adds this crazy layer of international spy intrigue to an already unbelievable financial crime. But the really crucial takeaway here is that this wasn't just one rogue company being bad. This was a total systemic collapse of the entire financial ecosystem. Think about it. We had blind regulators who actively protected the company. We had negligent auditors at EY completely failing to verify basic facts. And we had a market that was just so desperate for a European tech giant that they willingly suspended their own disbelief. Every single safeguard that is built to protect our economy was completely asleep at the wheel. And that brings us to Section 4, the final lesson. Ultimately, this whole disaster comes down to one absolutely vital concept: due diligence. Wirecard is the ultimate reminder that if something sounds too good to be true in the finance world, it almost always is. And guys, we are moving faster and faster into an age where digital finance and artificial intelligence are dominating the markets. In this kind of environment, numbers on a screen can very easily be pure fiction. They mean nothing if the foundation is built on lies. The essential, sometimes boring process of verifying financial structures, demanding actual proof, asking the hard questions, double-checking the math, it has literally never been more important than it is today. It's super easy to look back at Wirecard now and say, wow, how did everyone miss that? But foresight is a whole lot harder than hindsight. So I want to leave you with this. When you see a company growing at a pace that seems too good to be true, what are the very first red flags you look for? How do you plan to apply these lessons to your own financial decisions? Really think about that as you navigate today's markets. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. I hope it gave you a new perspective on why skepticism and doing your homework are so crucial. Keep asking those tough questions, and I'll see you in the next one.